So hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us today for Authors Uncovered with Ben Philippe in conversation with Billy Rutland. My name is Morgan Pershing. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at Sacramento Public Library, and our commitment to creating opportunities for our community is stronger than ever, like bringing one-of-a-kind author events such as Authors Uncovered, where you all are right now. And we also offer various virtual programs for all ages, from story times to book clubs to teen programming and English conversation groups. 21 of our branches are currently open, so go visit your local library. We have missed you. And since I have a captive audience of readers, I'm going to remind you that our summer reading program is for adults as well. It's happening right now and will be going on for another month. We put the link in the chat. Thank you to my lovely assistant, Kayla, for doing that. There are all kinds of reasons why you should be enjoying summer reading as an adult, like important reasons like grandparents and parents should be modeling good behavior for the kids, and participating in reading allows us to learn new things, escape, and keep our mind active. But really, my question is, when was the last time you were rewarded for reading as an adult? Probably never. And why should the kids have all the fun? So it's all online. It's super easy. It's read 5 books, get some library swag, and a free book. Give it a try, please. And that's my spiel about that. We will also put the link to sign up for summer reading in the chat. And now some housekeeping. Please put your questions in the Q&A. We'll have some time at the end of the program to answer them. And if you need to access the closed captioning, you can click on the live transcript at the bottom of the screen and click show subtitle. So we are very serious about accessibility, so we have a captioner for you. And if you post in the chat or Q&A, all of your comments will be public. So we ask that you keep the conversation civil and respectful. Anyone violating this code of conduct will be blocked. A recording will be made on a recording of this program will be made available on our website, saclibrary.org, later this week, as well as being uploaded to our YouTube channel. And finally, signed copies of Ben's book are available at Underground Books, so please go give Mother Rose some love. And now I'd like to introduce our guests. Our facilitator is Billy Rutland. Billy is the founder and president of the Rutland Group and has an established and respected figure in governmental advocacy. He began his career as a staff member with the California legislature, working first in the Senate and then in the Assembly. He served with the Senate Elections and Reapportionment Committee, worked for the Senate Republican leaders John Nageli and Ken Maddy, and finished his career in legislative service as the chief consultant to Assembly Speaker Willie L. Brown Jr. And our author is Ben Philippe. Ben is a New York-based writer and screenwriter, born in Haiti and raised in Montreal, Canada, or should I say Montreal. And he has written 2 young adult novels, Field Guide to the North American Teenager, winner of the 2020 William C. Morris Award, and Charming as a Verb. Sure I'll Be Your Black Friend is his first book of adult nonfiction. And in this collection of essays, Philippe recounts memories of his immigrant childhood, teenage years, falling into his college years during the age of Obama, and continuing into his adulthood during the Trump administration. So now I would like to introduce Billy and Ben. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
You're muted.
I think you're still muted.
There. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I got this sign up says the host is something. Anyway, I guess you can hear me. Hey, I got to ask one question before we start. I don't know if everybody's read the book. How much did it cost you to get that guy to take the swimming test?
Oh, that was, wow. That's the first time someone's asked me that question. It was $60.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
That was well worth it. I'm sorry.
I think so too. I think so too.
I don't know what I'm talking about, but oh yeah, I $60, yes. because
Yeah.
I found somebody too.
For people in the chat who haven't read the book, there's a chapter for my college graduation. You have to pass a swim test, which is going to the big Olympic-sized pool and swimming like one lap back and forth in front of everyone. And I can float in a very still lake, but I do not know how to swim. And I did not want to take my shirt off in front of the entire swim team of Columbia University. So I found another Black guy off Craigslist who knew how to swim to take the test for me. I think the statute of limitation has passed that they will not take away my degree at this point. Look, Billy, you're muted again.
Now, am I unmuted?
Now you're good.
Good. I noticed that the opening line to your introduction is right out of Pride and Prejudice, according to my sister, who was also a writer. My mother was a writer. They read Jane Austen every year, Pride and Prejudice. And we were talking about, she talked about how clever that was. I think it was. Anyway, I just think of you that.
Thank you.
Why? You were born in Haiti, then you went to, but it seems that you always wanted to be a writer. Is that accurate? And why? Because we stereotype, young Black guys growing up in Haiti, usually they're into sports or something, but it seems that you've always wanted to write.
I think I always really loved stories. And then when I was younger, that translated into a love of television, a love of like role-playing video games like Final Fantasy, where you could spend like 120 hours immersed in a single world. So I always loved storytelling, but being a writer is not something in my immigrant household that was sort of like a thing. I won't even say that it wasn't encouraged. It's just like, no, you cannot become a writer. That is a nice hobby to have, but you become a doctor or a lawyer or a
doctor, lawyer, Indian chief. Yeah, I got you.
Exactly. There's not. I even struggled to like find a third option. You become a doctor or a lawyer. So it took a while for me to sort of realize that like writing was a thing that you could make a living out of. So for my teenage years, it was like, I'm gonna write fan fiction online, and that wasn't a career path. And in college, I started majoring in economics, and then I slid to English, then I slid to film studies, and then finally I slid into creative writing. So it was kind of a long journey to realize that I could make a living out of writing, but I always loved writing. And I think for me, for a guy who is bravely 5'9", and for sports was never really an option, writing is a place where I really felt powerful, strangely enough. Like you can just do anything. You can be as angry as you want. You can be as sad as you want. So that was always really appealing, which is why I really, it's my first form of processing anything as an adult now.
Huh. Well, I know it's tough because, well, my mother was a writer and my sister writes, and it is tough, but my sister had somebody to follow. That's why I asked the question, because it didn't, your mother was a nurse, your dad was in academia, I guess, right? Yeah. And I said, oh man, this is interesting. And have you always been the smartest guy in the class? You say?
No.
I'm sorry.
I don't think I've ever been, no, that's not true. I think I was the smartest guy in my class in like the 5th grade for one semester. No, I've never, academia was just the thing you had to do. And I'm good at test taking. So there are things I just cannot do in life. I failed the driver's license test like 3 times, like the practical one. The theoretical one I could pass with the blindfold on, but like the practical one, spatial awareness, signaling, that was very difficult for me. Taking tests, filling in SAT little bubbles, I'm lucky that that's always been fairly easy for me.
I guess we should talk about the book a little bit. And the title kind of misled me, because as I begin to read it, it seems more like an autobiographical about you. I thought that was quite telling. Am I off the mark there?
No, it's autobiographical. I think I wanted to find a way of making an autobiography palatable, because I was also aware when I started to write it that I'm a 29-year-old who's lived a pretty, all over the place life, but a pretty privileged life, all things considered. So I had a little bit of cringe about like, why am I writing a memoir? And I was reflecting on my life, and I realized that one thing I had, one sort of strand that goes through life in Haiti, Canada, Texas, New York, has been I'm often the Black guy in white spaces. Even looking at like my photos of parties I throw, I have a diverse friend group, but my closest friends, my best friends, 2, 3 best friends up to until today are white. So that was always a thing I wanted to like explore, and that sort of became the thesis of the book.
The I had this what is I had this thought and you just made me forget it. So I will move on. But I assumed you grew up privileged. I know what I wanted to ask, and I thought I know what's a bit different. You're an immigrant. Wait, first of all, are you American citizen now?
No, I'm not. O visa status, currently applying for my green card.
Oh, okay. So you can't vote.
No, I can't. I can
Okay.
bug people into voting, but I can't vote.
Yeah, you can't vote. Why you're do you think there's a difference between being an immigrant, a Black immigrant, as opposed to a Black American? Because you've had different experiences than a Black kid growing up in America, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one of my big bumps when I first sort of came to first Canada and then to the United States. I had to learn about American culture, and I had to learn about American culture fairly late in life. I didn't know who James Baldwin was until I was like 22, 23. I did not really know the Black history of Harlem, all the things that are really important to me now that I had to learn by reading books, by living here for a while. They do not come to me as a given. And I think there's sometimes a perception that if you're Black, you know everything about Blackness, right? That you just know all the slang, all the cultures. Believe me, like a guy trying to like trade a fist bump from me when I first came to America was the most awkward dance. I would like grab it, lean it. I don't know what to do, help me. By the end, I would just be on the floor with my paws up, like I don't know what to do. So I had to learn my Afro-American identity, or like the Afro-American history. And it's a learning curve, I think, especially growing up in Canada, where a lot of my interests weren't quote unquote Black, whatever that means. I was the guy who was going home to binge Gilmore Girls, and I found basketball and kind of boring. So there were a lot of things that people expect out of your Black identity that I just did not have. So the immigrant experience made for a different path into learning about Blackness. But ultimately, it crescendos into me being a Black man in America now, right? It doesn't matter what's on your Spotify, what books you read, what you're into, how you dress. If you're a Black body roaming this land, you have something in common with all the Black bodies roaming this land. So I think a lot of the book is diffused in that tension between not accepting sort of my own Blackness, like the things I already come into the world with, and learning about Black culture that I'm still integrating.
Well, you made a reference to you've clearly done a lot of reading, and you made references to a lot of books and advised folks to read. One of my favorites is The Color of Law by Rothstein, who was just an amazing book in my mind. And now he's writing a thing on reparation. I don't know how he expects to get that there, but anyway, you also, it seemed to me when I first started reading your book, you had 2 maids, and that opened my eyes. I said, oh man, this guy's been privileged. And I know that's 2 maids in Haiti is a little different than maybe 2 maids in the United States, but it feels as though it hasn't been that bad. It seemed that you were a little poorer maybe when you got to Canada, but you've always been in good environments. Is that accurate?
It depends which lens we want to put on good. In Haiti, I think I say somewhere in the book that we went from being upper middle class in Haiti to being lower tier, like lower class in Canada. Haiti is a world that the disparity between those who have and those who don't have is massive. So my mom was also a nurse in Haiti, and my dad worked in the administrative world of Haitian politics. But that gave us funds for a pretty big house. And, in Haiti, they sent cousins to Port-au-Prince, to the capital. So we had like friends of family members who sent like people, oh, they'll just stay with you and work within your house. So it made for a pretty, I was 5 years old when I left Haiti, but it made for a pretty sort of like high-end lifestyle. And when we got to Canada, we lived in a small apartment. My family's first source of income at first was renting the house in Haiti. And I think like, it's weird when you're young, like those amounts of money are huge to you. Like you're renting the house for $12,000 a year, but I know, but can a family of three survive on $12,000 a year? In Canada, no, you can't. So I think I experienced both extremities without really within the same family environment. So the same family that was wealthy in Haiti was really lower class in Canada. And then my parents divorced. So my mom was a single mother whose nursing degree in Haiti was not given an equivalency and in North America. So she had to go back to high school to sort of become a nurse's assistant. So then we were really, really poor, I'll say it. And that also kind of unlocked new opportunities because when I got into good colleges, if your family makes under, I think it was $40,000, your child would get a free ride. And I think the year that I got into Columbia University, me and mom made like 22,000. So we're like, oh, you get a free ride to college. So it's been a little bit all over.
Yeah, you're lucky. How is your mom, by the way? You refer to her quite a bit. She seems like a wonderful person.
She's good. She's good. I write too much about her, as I say in the book. I've created a monster who Googles herself. She's great. She's in Canada. I haven't seen her in quite a while because of the pandemic. But she's sort of like established a life for herself. I support her financially. Sorry if this turns into therapy to the audience. If you ask me any questions, I think I'm still an only child to her. So the older she gets, the more I realize that coming to America to pursue my dreams of being like a writer, a screenwriter, all that stuff, I left her alone back in a cold country that she never chose, but that my dad chose for her. So I get occasional pangs of guilt about that. But she's going good. She's fine.
And your dad's back in Haiti?
No, I believe he's in Canada. Two wives later.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay. All right. Right. Do you this book contains so many things: advice, reading lists, memoirs, glossary of collections of essays. How did you decide to take these forms, these many forms?
It's silly to say, but I really wanted the book to sort of feel like being friends with me. The Blackness, the racial identity was a big part of the book, but I think I also wanted to explore friendship, especially male friendships. I think that's something we don't really talk a lot about in the world. So I thought, what's the experience of being friends with someone? Well, sometimes you just share book recommendations like, hey, I read this, you should read this. Sometimes it's a Q&A. It's almost like, oh, so where'd you grow up? I grew up there. What do you like? I like this. Like there's a section of the book that is Q&A-esque, and I have white friends who sometimes like say, hey, what does woke mean? Not now, but like 4 or 5 years ago, they'll just like ask you questions about like your Blackness. So there's a glossary at the end. And sometimes
I saw that glossary and it helped to educate me because I'm a little older on something. I'm just learning about woke myself. So
see, and it's like it's all boiled into the idea of by the time you're done with the 300 something pages of the book, you will have a good idea of what it's like to be friends with me. And some parts are messy. Some parts I overshare. Some parts I'm moody. I share my opinions on dating. I talk about dating a lot. It's just like an overall glimpse into a social relationship with me. And I say in the book, and I tell people that like, it's not very likely. There's a chance you will not like the person once you know all of this stuff about them. And that's okay. I'm not friends with everyone on earth because I'm a very specific person. But hopefully the bigger takeaway is that, oh, all this interiority, quote unquote, that I have, the messiness, the history, the anxiety, the neurosis, every Black person in the world has that. I'm not a special snowflake. So I think this impulse that exists in the media and in the world to just boil Black bodies, Black males to a specific set of experiences is inaccurate. So hopefully by the end of the book, people have a better sense of me beyond just this little outline of a Black figure. And they'll take away that every Black person has that level of interiority.
Yeah, you do make a lot of good references for stuff to read. Tim, you say a lot of stuff in this book, and I'm wondering. I know the friends, the people you talk. I mean, won't they know? Can they identify themselves? Is what I guess I'm trying to ask. And have you heard from them?
I have. Always been very selfish about my writing. I know people, this is my first book of nonfiction, but before I wrote young adult fiction. And for example, in my first book, there's a character named Artie who is based on my friend Artie. She had the perfect name and I'm like, you're perfect for the story. Can I tell HarperCollins that it's okay to use your name? And she was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. So I've always been of the opinion that if something happened to me, if I have a thought in my head, it's mine. I get to write about it however I want. So I was not particularly careful in picking from my life and writing this book. And it just didn't dawn on me until some people read the book. Some people that never read any of my young adult books, because they're like, I'm an adult, I don't read books for teenagers. But they read this book and then they wanted to have conversations with me. In fact, like the first chapter of the book, it talks of my friend Marty, who's like one of those friends you make as an adult in New York City where you go for drinks like once every 5-6 months. And in no world would I ever expect Marty to read my book. But then one time we're having our biannual drinks and he was like, so this Marty character in your book, that's me, right? And I was just like, oh crap. And he was a little, not offended. I would say he was a little bristled at the fact that I took, that I sort of like, I boiled him down to a few specific quotes he had said during one of our drinks that sort of launched the book. And basically, again, just a backstory for people. Marty once told me, I told him I was writing a memoir about my friendships with white people way back. And his answer was that, you know, as a white guy, it's not fun to always be the bad guy in all the narratives, that like women tell stories and I'm the bad guy and people of color tell narratives and I'm the bad guy. It's just not fun. And I thought that was an interesting thought and that sort of launched the book. But Marty just really wanted to have a conversation about like, hey, you didn't really fully flesh out my argument. You didn't really give me interiority. And I was just like, no, Marty, I didn't. It's my book. And you did say that. I quoted you verbatim. So I did have to have that conversation with him. So that there are a couple of people in the book that happened with, but it's mostly been fine. And I think the person I'm harshest to in the book, objectively speaking, is my dad. And
yeah, that's true.
I struggle to care if he doesn't like it. I kind of, and again, this is where it delves into therapy. I'm confident that my dad would be very proud of me, which is very, very strange to someone who lived his life trying to piss off his dad. But if he has thoughts, you know, I wrote my experience. And ultimately that's where I take comfort in writing the book.
Haven't you reached that pinnacle for most everyone to be proud, at least of your accomplishment? I mean, you know, you went to Columbia, you graduated up, I mean, you're doing pretty good.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very proud of my accomplishments, but I think in the case of my dad, this is fully therapy now. I apologize, dear audience.
Okay.
There's a line, I don't know if you've ever watched the sitcom Friends.
Yeah, of course. Everybody's seen Friends. Yeah.
I basically learned English watching Friends and Seinfeld and the Drew Carey Show. There's a line that Rachel says in one episode that she realizes she's kind of mean when she's teaching Joey how to like operate a boat. And she's like, I was trying so hard not to become my mother. I became my father. And I think I have that line in my head somehow because I'm in academia. I went to good colleges. I wrote books plural. I'm like, oh, those are all the things that would have made that man very happy to have in a child, even though I've been like blowing him a raspberry since for most of my life. So that is something I had to wrestle with, the depiction of my dad and the anxiety that created afterwards.
How about all your siblings or half siblings or part siblings? Do they know you, of you? Have they read your stuff? You have no clue, do you?
I have a clue for a couple. One of them reached out on social media and I just, no. It's hard for me enough to make friends as it is. Making friends with someone who's a grown-up person that lives in like Atlanta, that's like, oh, you have half nieces. I'm like, no, I don't. I've never met you. So I think I have that sort of they're genetically my half siblings, but they're sort of all over the map. And the only thing we share is this like trunk of trauma because daddy was a big hoe. And
Daddy was a big hoe. How about Corinne St. Pierre? Do you know her? She went to Columbia too.
No, could you repeat the name?
Corinne Jean Pierre, if I'm saying it right. She went to Columbia. She works for Biden now, and she's from Haiti, a lesbian lady from Haiti.
Oh, no, I don't know her. I'm pretty sure we're not half siblings. No.
Okay, I just thought, I just wondered. She was in the news lately, and she grew up in Haiti and graduated from Columbia. You know, we all know each other. Remember?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll see you at the cookout.
Yeah, exactly. So you, I have a nephew who suggested that you're a good beginner black friend is how they put it. You know, you're not going to scare anybody too much. You can converse with them, and I think that's pretty accurate description. You don't seem that hard to befriend.
Oh, thank you. I think I'm pretty friendly. I always like the line, sometimes the best way to show teeth is to smile. And sort of growing up in Canada where I was like, the only black kid in that school and then one of the few black families in that town, I learned to get along fairly easily as sort of like almost not survival instinct. That's very dramatic. Canadians are very polite, so there were never really any outward display of racism that in my life where I very rarely felt in danger. I only felt like I was a minority, but I think I developed a little bit of tolerance, whatever that means, for white people who mean well, who genuinely mean well, but who have problematic views. And now that I'm a teacher, I know more people of color. Now that I've been in America for 12 years, there's sometimes that like, I talk to black folks and they're like, yeah, no, this person said this, and then I cut them off because that was like unacceptable. And I just think back to, oh, someone once said that exact same thing to me. And then we had a conversation for 4 or 5 hours because that's how I was raised into just getting along, especially when you're the child of immigrants. Like, don't make a fuss. Like, there's no going home and saying, well, Eric called me the N-word, so I punched him at school. My dad would be like, why are you punching kids at school? We did not leave Haiti to come here for you to get into fights and get suspension. So I think I just developed like an amiable smile and that led to a lot of conversation.
I know, I read in the book where you worked on that smile. Do you think you want to become an American citizen, or you're not going to be, you don't need to be bothered with it? Because we're gonna need another vote in 2024.
We're gonna need it. Listen, I definitely want to get my green card and get the right to vote. Part of me is really tied to my Canadian identity, whatever that means. I like the fact that I can go back there and I think of, my mom's very small condo as home. So I would like to get my green card. I'm in the process of getting the green card after like 20 different types of visas and so many lawyers over the years. I want to participate politically in the land that is America. And I think here's a weird thing, because this is fully just like oversharing. That thing that I think I might be a bit of an American patriot while being a Canadian who was born in Haiti. I'm very aware of that because that thing happened on January 6th and it broke my heart in a way I was not expecting. And I've had to sort of like, fire truck, but I had to sort of wrestle with that. Like, why is this affecting me so much? This is not my country. I can't vote here. I did not contribute to this administration. I did not contribute to sort of voting out this administration. So why are these images on my screen affecting me so much? And I think part of me has sort of like tofu soaked up the American ideal. So I very much love this place and I would like to participate in it.
Towards the end of your book, you were very clear. It did get to you. Black Lives Matter and the protesting. You engaged. Where do you teach?
I used to teach at Barnard College, which is part of the university here in the city.
Everybody knows what Barnard is. Lord have mercy. Okay, go on Barnard, Columbia.
And that's mostly where I used to teach. I'm wrapping up my 5-year, 10-year teaching to focus on TV writing now. But I like always having like a toe in academia. So next year I'm hoping to teach like 1 semester here, 1 semester there. Because I enjoy universities. I enjoy colleges. I love that space.
What classes do you teach?
Mostly the fun stuff. So I thought like screenwriting, American television drama, the adaptation, which looked at how famous and infamous novels are adapted from one to the screen to TV. Mostly the cool stuff, like really making the most of that film studies background.
And have you done screenwriting? Did I miss that? Have you?
Oh yeah, for a few years now. Now I'm doing it full time. I'm in the writer's room for Only Murders in the Building, the Martin Short, Selena Gomez, and Steve Martin show on Hulu that's starting in August. I wrote for the adaptation of Interview with a Vampire that's coming on AMC. That's mostly it these days. I've dabbled in it. It's hard to break into, so it's been like a full decade of trying. Wow,
that is different. Are you going to continue in this nonfiction venue, or are you just going to do whatever you feel like on the day when you wake up?
I mean, that would be a nice privilege to access. Speaking of privilege, I don't have that privilege yet. I definitely want to write more books. I miss writing books for teenagers because it feels like the conversation is different. This book made a lot of people angry. Boy, were people pissed in my Instagram mentions. But I think I'm very proud of it. I'm very happy that I wrote it. I don't know if I have more to say right now on the nonfiction side of things. So I think I need to experience it. I need to live it more before I write my second, if I ever write a second nonfiction book. This is not Sedaris. I don't have like a different one every couple of years. Here's 300 more pages of life experience. No, now I'm taking comfort in make-believe.
Yeah, it's tough to make a comfortable. I mean, it's just like a musician. There are a lot of really great musicians, but not all of them get paid the same, so to speak. But you seem to have crossed that bridge, and you are fairly well recognized in a number of venues. So I mean, it sounds like you're well on your way.
Fingers crossed. I think it's always. I'm very happy with everything I've done. I'm very proud that I've been and lucky that I've been able to do all of this. I never feel fully settled And I think when I have this conversation with my mom, her answer was very much like, you're an immigrant. You're never going to feel settled. And because I always have the fear that like, it's all going to go away. Something's going to happen. And it's all going to go away. For years, my mother had this thing where as soon as there was like lived in Canada, so there were snowstorms fairly often. As soon as there was a big snowstorm that was announced, she would like put a bunch of pots on the oven and boil water. And I fully did not understand why. And she herself did not fully understand why. But having boiled clean water in case things go bad was sort of like how you preserve yourself. Growing up in Haiti, in like the small villages of Haiti, that was a thing she found solace in. And I think I don't boil water, but I have that same anxiety that like things might go bad at any point.
Huh. Is she still a nurse? I mean, is she still working as a nurse?
No, she's retired. She worked as a private nurse for a while, and now I keep saying her age all over, and she's gonna hate me, but she's like 71 now, so she's retired.
That's all right. She's got a very successful son. She doesn't have nothing to worry about. Okay, I understand that a lot of people have questions, and I don't think we've allowed them to ask, but I don't know how to deal with that. So if somebody has questions, I don't know.
I got you, Billy. I got you.
Thank you, Morgan.
My pleasure. So we do have several questions.
Yay.
First one is from Greg, and he asks, what do you prefer, writing books or screenplays? Do you find it difficult transitioning between the two mediums?
Ooh, the obnoxious answer is that I love both equally. For different reasons. I think screenplays are very, very clean in that everything boils down to scene direction and dialogue and action, and you just know what pillars to hit. So it's very linear in that way. And novels, you're just like limitless possibilities. In 2 sentences, you can cover like a century. So I think I like bouncing back and forth between the two. And I think I'm a little bit better of a screenwriter than a novelist, which I probably shouldn't say while promoting an actual book. But yeah, I enjoy doing both.
Well, now I want to ask a question, but how come we didn't talk about screenwriting in the book?
I think because it was still in process while I was writing the book, and it sort of, I don't know how it relates to my identity as a Black friend, quote unquote. It was just this like career pursuit that was happening. One thing, because there seems to be a few questions about people who want to be writers out there, and I, as a teacher, I have to give advice about that stuff all the time. Writers lie. People lie. When you read a Vanity Fair profile of someone who's like, I sold my first screenplay at age 25, what they're not telling you is that A, daddy is a studio executive, or B, that they were rejected 400 times. So while I was writing this book, what was mostly happening were rejections, lots and lots and lots of rejections. Like the whole screenwriting thing, I'm bravely 32 now. It started to happen in like my late 29. That's when it sort of started to gain a little momentum. So that's probably why I didn't write about it.
Makes sense. Do you think that you were attracted to screenwriting because of your love of pop culture and TV shows and that kind of thing?
Deeply. English is my third language, Creole, French, and then English. And I fully learned English partly because of my dad, damn it, but also watching TV. Like my parents were going through a messy immigrant divorce in the background. They're like, here's a TV, here's a cable splitter, stay in your room. And I just inhaled TV, and it's where I developed my love of stories, and I just learned how to speak English that way. Yeah, I love TV.
Thank you. Okay, another question is, why did you choose to start writing with YA fiction, and do you anticipate writing any adult fiction in the future, aside from screenplays?
I'm gonna give the lie, and then I'm gonna give the real answer. The lie is that as someone who is not emotionally stunted, but I feel like a lot of the big markers of like growing up as a human, for me, they happened later in life. They happened like first big heartbreak, first really deep friendships, all that stuff happened in my early 20s. So emotionally, I think I live very comfortably telling stories set in a high school, like making those people 16-year-olds who are like a little emotionally reckless. I still relate to that. So it works well for my own emotional stuntedness. And that's why I find the form pleasing. And the only two limitations of YA really are that your protagonists have to be under 16 or 16 or under, and that you can't be too graphic with the sex, which is fine. I don't write really graphic sex scenes naturally. So everything I want to write lives comfortably in YA. And that is why I write YA. Now, all of that was not a lie. All that stuff is really, really true. The real reason why I write YA is because I finished my MFA with a very obnoxious collection of short stories. And I got an agent, and I thought I was going to be like the voice of my generation. And they submitted the manuscript to I think it was like 14 publishing houses on a Friday. And by Tuesday, like 11 of them had said no. And by later that Tuesday, they had all said no. So adult fiction wasn't working for me. I had to get a job in marketing. I was a paralegal for a while. I wrote essays for people off of Craigslist, just making the bills. And while I was doing all that to keep writing fun, to start like that next thing I was going to put out there, I had to write something that was fun for me. And a story of a teenager, of a snarky teenager in a high school, that was really, really fun. So I finished like a third of my first YA book, my first book ever. And I showed it to a friend who was a publishing assistant. And she was like, oh, this is young adult. I did not know what that was, but that was sort of like the lane I had written myself into. So it worked out. And that's sort of why I write YA. Both things are true, but one of them was a very sort of pay the bills type of reason.
Gotcha. For everyone out there, I have to be a librarian for a second and let you all know that even if you're adults, young adult literature is extremely rich and readable, and I recommend it highly.
And also, I think I totally agree with that. And I'm not just like tooting my own horn. Teenagers get bored very, very easily. You're not going to get away with like 300 pages of people having like metaphorical conversations in kitchens if you're writing for teenagers. So those books like move very, very well. They pay more attention to structure. So yeah, young adult, fun.
Yes, YA, read it. Okay. Oh, Ginger wants to know about why people are angry at you about the book.
Oh.
Ginger's my sister.
Yeah, that's Billy's sister, so she's a
okay.
And a writer.
Hi. Thanks for asking that. Okay. There's this chapter in the book called Sure I'll Be Your Race Wars. And I write about the summer of 2020. And in the book, I talk about how I was in the middle of writing a manuscript for this book. And then the summer of 2020 happened. And it felt like the world was imploding. We were all wearing masks. We were all afraid. And suddenly, like George Floyd was assassinated and people were dealing with that. And I just had felt this exhaustion. And one day I went out to march with people in Brooklyn. And when I was on the train back home, feeling pretty despondent about the situation in the world. Like I didn't think things were going to get better. I didn't think this was actual change. I thought it was all performative, black squares on Instagram. And there was this, we were all on the train going home with masks on. And there was this slightly intoxicated older white man who was just like going on a rant, as one does on the New York subway system. And he was like, this whole thing, I don't like it. I don't like it. This is going to end up in a race war. Believe me, this is going to end up in a race war. And everyone was ignoring him as you ignore someone who's ranting on the subway. And I just kept thinking about that. Like, is he right? If we don't fix this, if we don't fix racism, is that ultimately where the world is going to culminate? Like, people are going to side with their own ethnicities and all be at war with each other. And in writing about that moment, I imagine what that would look like. And I'm like, well, I've been called an Oreo all my life. Black on the outside, white on the inside. That was the insult that like the black kids and the white kids sort of lob at you when you're in high school. And I'm like, but I'm black. I'm a black person. So if the world doesn't get fixed and turns into race wars, I'm going to have to side with the blacks. And I talk about all the white people I write about, my first love, my best friend, and that how this horrible dystopia is going to force me to be at war with these people, to lock them all in a room and like blow up that building. And I say that the pastor's dream is going to be dead, because I grew up believing that Martin Luther King died, and in doing so fixed racism. I was a very, very simple child, but from Canada, that's what it looked like in America. And it's really heartbreaking for me. It became a full nightmare where I went on an interview and the person interviewing me read that excerpt without any of the context. So she just read like the quote unquote fantasy of this Black intellectual liberal fantasizing about killing white people. And at first I was like, oh, this is so stupid. There's no way this is going to become a thing. Boy, did it become a thing, because people aren't interested in reading, not even the full book, not even the full essay, literally the full paragraph. If you read the sentence right before it, that world where I kill all the white people in my life, Daenerys Targaryen is also flying on dragons in that horrible dystopia. It's very much a dystopia. But that was stripped of the conversation. And like, I left Twitter, which ended up being like a beautiful thing that like frees up a lot of of brain space. But they were like, oh, he wants to kill all the whites. And my job was getting calls to have me fired. People were leaving 1-star reviews. My DMs were just columns of the N-word. Like, it was really, really strange, because I thought, I don't think I wrote anything subversive in that excerpt. At first, I just wanted to like apologize and be like, I'm so sorry. Stop threatening my mother with sexual violence. Like, just please stop. But then I went back to actually reading the book, and I was like, I didn't write anything remotely related to what people are accusing me of. And I think the thing that like really angered the bad faith racists out there was that I turned the polarity of the violence in the book for just a brief moment, for the space of one sentence. I write about, as a Black man, racism is exhausting, and here is an image of Black people willingly doing violence to white people. And that just triggered all the floodgates of just people like, let's go, N-word. Yeah, let's start it. And it's screenshots of my family, myself, just, it was messy. I'm over it now. The moment passed. The internet has very short memory, but that was the reason for the backlash.
Sounds hard and scary.
Yeah, it thickened my skin to the internet.
Yeah, but good for you for getting off Twitter.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Rigo wants to know if you can talk about your experiences being Black in academia.
Oh, sure. I'm very lucky to have made a living in academia, because I know like there are schools where adjuncts make like $900 a semester and they have to teach for 5 months. Oh, sorry, Morgan. I know. It's, even when I started, I didn't make a lot. I think I made 3,000, but that's still a lot compared to some other schools. So I'm very lucky to have forged a path in academia without having to get a PhD. With all of that, I'm aware of that. But I think they're kids ages 18 to 22. So it's a very precarious time where, especially at the school where I used to teach, where a lot of people are very privileged. So I will say like 99% of my students, 99 out of 100 students are amazing. I would not have done it for 5 years if it wasn't kind of great. But occasionally there's one student that kind of sees you as an assistant. That sort of, there's a lot of privilege and to like, oh, well, you gave me a B-. Well, that's wrong. You expected me to submit work on time. Well, that's wrong. Can I speak to your supervisor? The future quote unquote Karens of the world, like they're in college majoring in film studies right now. So there was a lot of like bumping up against that as you teach. And you have to sort of find a place to be an authority figure and to sort of be mindful that they're still young, they're still learning. But occasionally, no, you cannot talk to me that way because I displeased you. Your dad cannot fire me. You're not entitled to just my agent's information just because you asked. You're not entitled to a spot in this class just because you asked. You're not entitled to skip literally 10 out of 12 weeks and then file a report for me for giving you a failing grade. So those were all the little bumps along the way. But it's also been great. Like on the fun side, I get the smartest people I know are in academia, like from, you know, people working within the department to other teachers to like grad students and PhD students, people who love education, who love learning, who love books. it's kind of great that like society has like created these little campuses where they all live. So it's been a mixed bag, but heavily leaning on the positive.
Okay.
Were those the only questions? Oh, they were so polite.
No, there's more.
Oh.
I'm just reading them first.
Yeah, that's good.
Samari has an interesting question. How do you write about real pain while moving on and staying positive in your present? Is it possible to separate a moment's feeling from your present perspective?
Ooh, that is a very good and very deep question.
It is.
Yeah, wow.
Something I'm not a crier just by nature. I rant a lot. I talk a lot. I process things by talking and writing. Crying happens like once every 5 years. But something happened while I was researching last summer, actually, the summer of 2020, while I was writing about that. At some point, my browser was just like 20 tabs opened, from George Floyd to Breonna Taylor to all the Black people who had sort of been executed in modern American times, like not even like going back to Emmett Till, just like in the past 2-3 years. And I was just reading their entire stories, reading their biographies, their Wikipedia pages, and I just started to sob. It was like 11 in the morning, it was sunny, but I was just overwhelmed with grief about this thing that I felt myself perfectly equipped to write, but it suddenly just hit me. For like that moment, I just started to sob and sob and sob. And that was very overwhelming. I powered through the essay, but that's not a feeling I can carry into my everyday life. So I like to access those feelings and maybe feel the catharsis of writing about them, and then try to sort of like close that bundle, leave it on the page, save the Word document, and go on with my life. The good news is that I think I'm generally a pretty positive person. Now, part of it is like a coping mechanism. Your dad used to whip you, racism, et cetera, et cetera. You learn to smile through it. But I think I'm kind of a positive person. So when I'm not actively facing the thoughts, I mostly think of the Gilmore Girls and cartoons. So I read books, I watch TV. So I try to just compartmentalize, I guess, which I think might be just sort of like, code switching, another word for that, as Black people, as any minority, as women, as POCs, anyone that's like marginally different in the world, you compartmentalize. And I'm very good at compartmentalizing the good from the bad and just reorienting myself.
Sometimes it saves yourself if you can compartmentalize. I am jealous of being able to do that. Sunshine asks, as a person of color, I have close white friends. Can you speak to your experience of having white friends who may not understand the minority experience? So you end up clearing up misconceptions, which may cause friendships to be more work.
Oh, I so sympathize. I really do. I think you have to practice self-care and know what you're capable of living with as a person. And there's not an answer for every person of color out there, right? I've been on panels with other Black people and they've been like, man, if anyone ever said to me what Marty said to you in chapter 1, I would have just deleted their number and never spoken to them again. And I'm like, well, yeah, but then I would lose Marty. He would no longer be my friend. And I have a few close friends that I really, really love and cherish. So I don't mind occasionally doing the work to sort of like get us closer to a point of reconciliation. And I think the same thing happens from all perspectives. I can ride the same subway as women. My women friend, I will never have the same experience of what it's like to ride the subway as a woman in New York City. I just won't. So sometimes them sharing that experience with me is very valuable for me. And me sharing my experience as a Black male is valuable to them. And I did not grow up exposed to any Jewish culture. So I have Jewish friends who sort of explained to me what the difference between a bat mitzvah and a bar mitzvah was. I try to do that research myself. But I think also friendships are spaces where questions are allowed, right? And if it's coming from a good place, some people might not feel equipped to answer those questions. Sometimes I feel equipped to answer them. And I think part of the journey of the book was me learning like, no, this is too much. I cannot be I will not be and I cannot be your Black friend that you use as an excuse to be a racist out in the world, right? Well, I treat all those Black people in my life horribly, but that's okay because I have a Ben that enjoys watching, Game of Thrones with me. So that was something I had to learn to sort of like where to draw the line, where to sort of be like, I cannot be that person for you. I cannot be that excuse for you. Another thing that came up during the summer of 2020, I was like, I did not write about this, but I think I was the Black person who received some of those DMs. Hey, don't you think they're going too far with the statues? Hey, how does looting a store really help solve racism? And that wasn't a great feeling. I was like, oh, what am I putting out into the world that like some people feel like I'm the Black person they have to look to for that fist bump, right? But then that led to a conversation that like, no, that I will find. If I've done something to make you think that that's okay, now it's up to me to do the same, to sort of like correct and rectify that and tell you why I don't think that's okay. And to the credit of my friends, they met me halfway. There are very few people in my life who have not met me halfway. And those that haven't, the block button is very, very easy to access. They fell out of the way because we were never really friends. But I don't think there's a universal line for everyone. I think you as a person practicing self-care have to find like how much you can handle, how much racism, how much microaggression, how much macroaggression you can live with. And depending on your identity, how much sexism, how much transphobia, how much xenophobia, how much anything can you handle within the space of your friendships. And just try to hold on to good people. It's exhausting. It's exhausting.
Okay, our final question, because we only have 1 minute left.
Oh.
What is the experience of being in a writer's room like?
Ooh, okay, I can answer that very quickly. It's 12 people who are nothing alike, who've lived like very different lives. I think when you're in college, you assume like it's like a college seminar. No, because in college, you're all 18 to 22, you're all making in film. In a writer's room, there are people who are industry veterans who are like 55 years old, and there are 22-year-olds who are right out of USC. It's all of you working in service of someone else's vision. And writers are very, egomaniacal creatures. So I think that's where like the tensions can arise. But I've been lucky that all 2.5 really of my writers' rooms have been really great with amazing showrunners. But I think the big lesson is learning that like, you are all servicing someone else's vision. So if you were writing the script yourself, you would make a bunch of choices, but you are pitching ideas to the person who is in charge of this show, to the showrunner, to the executive producers. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of very, very smart people. For me, like, the trick for a while was finding out what am I good at, especially as a teacher when like it's up to you to talk and fill the silence. In a writer's room, sometimes you just have to not talk for 2 hours because they're pitching on a story beat you don't have a grasp on. So knowing when to back away while also like, hey, I have to go be a teacher and talk for 3 hours now, compartmentalizing again was the challenge for me. But it's very fun. It's my dream job. I've been wanting to do this since I was a kid with a black and white TV in my room. So I'm very, very grateful. I haven't blown it all to hell yet.
Well, please don't. So we'll end it in just a moment. I want to thank Billy and Ben so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Billy.
Thank
I
you.
want to say again that you can get Ben's book at Underground Books, signed copies. So please go support Mother Rose and our local bookstore because that's so important. And thank you all for coming. This was an amazing event, and we'll see you again in August 25th, where we are hosting some of the creators of the graphic novel We Hereby Refuse, which is about Japanese American protests during the time of internment camps. So it should be interesting. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ben. I look forward to seeing some more stuff from you. So, keep it going.
Thank you. I'll try.
Right.
Okay.
There's no elegant way to do this, so I am clicking.
I know, it's the awkward. We have to.
All right. Bye.